I have just created a new document. You have to forgive me for wanting to get myself situated here for a few seconds. Okay, new document. Looking at the vector tools in Krita, there's lots of workspaces that you can use in Krita. You can use an animation workspace, you can use paint workspaces, and there's actually something called Big Vector that you could go to, but you don't have to use the vector workspace in order to do vectors. You can use a paint, you can even use vectors in animation workspace. So it doesn't really matter what workspace you're in, and my Krita is probably looking different from your Krita anyway, so it doesn't much matter. You can still find all of the tools where they need to be found. But let's just look at I'll just use this big draw space. Just for the heck of it, I'm going to take this lower layer and I'm going to fill it with the background layer so that what else I'm doing can be seen. I'm going to go up to the second layer. Actually, what I don't want to do is go up to the second layer. What I do want to do is I want to go down here and add a vector layer. If you see where my mouse is, you could see, I hope my pointer's visible, but anyway, where it is right there, that's a vector symbol, which is different from the raster symbol, and that's the layer you're going to be using the vector tools on. And you can use the you cannot use the regular drawing tools, if you look at any of these tools, on a vector layer. You have to see, it won't let it be used. You have to use the vector tools, and these are the vector tools up here. And just to start off, this is the way I use vector tools. I'm going to turn this layer off just so that I can see what I'm doing, because the last color chosen will be the color that shows up. Let me use this. This is a vector line. You don't want to see your line looking like that. So you have to go in and you have to change. If you get your vector line, you have to change the properties up here. Tool options. Oh gosh. It would be so nice if I could remember how this is done, because it's been so long since I've done it. There we go. I'm going to go to the line and I'm going to go to the color, and I'm going to change the color to black. There we go. Change the color to black. So whatever line you need, whatever color you need, you have to change it in this tool option setting. You could change it to any color that you want. You can also change the thickness, how many pixels the stroke is here. Let me lower this so everything can be seen. So you can also change the end cap, rounded, flat. There's a square cap or there's a butt cap. You can have mitered joints or rounded joints or a beveled joint. These are all things that you can experiment with. But in terms of drawing with vectors, I usually use the mouse instead of a pen on the tablet, the stylus. You draw and move. You can either bend the line at the time of drawing it and enter when you want it to be filled, or you can just draw a straight line and hit enter, and then with this tool, which is the edit shapes tool, that's the when you click on your line, that's the time at which you can change the line that you've drawn and alter its shape and move it around. If you want just one side selected, see, you click on it and now that just moves that side. If you want to move both, you hit the shift button and click on it, and now they both move. I am being horrible in explaining this, I realize. I'm going to now hit the shift button, and I clicked here and it deselected it. So now this is the one I'm moving. If I try to move this one, I click on it and it moves, but it's selected and only it will be moved. It's selected. You can see that it's highlighted in blue. The white side is not being selected. When you click on it, that's selecting that side. And again, if you want both of them selected so that you can move them both, you have to shift and go to the white side, shift, hold the shift button and click, and now they're both highlighted. So they both move when you manipulate them. That is probably very confusing, because if you're not familiar with using these tools, you'll probably have a difficult time understanding, and you will have a little bit of a frown on your face. But you have to try to experiment with it, and just remember that to draw a line you can use the Freehand path tool, which I do not recommend because that adds a bunch of points. This looks like just a line with a curve here and a curve here. However, when you select that, well, actually there you go, it does only have 3 points. But the longer you make your freehand tool line, the more movement you have in it, the more points you're going to have. And if you don't want all these points, maybe you liked this curve but you don't like that point, you have to get rid of it. Now, here we are in the Edit Shapes tool. You can delete this point. Find it up here. This says Insert Point. This says Remove Point. Boom, it was highlighted, now it's gone. That's how you can delete a point. If you want to, between here and here, if I select this, I have both of these selected. It's highlighted in blue rather than white. Notice, by the way, there are 2 points here, very close together. But if you want another point in between these 2 lines, you highlight them both, and then you can add a point, and it will put it in the middle. Then you can manipulate this point as needed. When I'm looking at what I'm doing here, I'm thinking to myself, this is screwy. This is crazy. How can anyone understand what I'm saying? Because it's so, if you're not familiar with it, it's so very foreign. But what I can say is get in there and experiment. Let me go back now to the Select Shapes tool. Again, you see my line thickness was at 60 pixels. I'm going to change that to 5 pixels. Just so that I have a nicer looking line. I'm going to go back to my Edit Shapes tool, and I'm going to get rid of that point that I can choose. It's highlighted now, and I can go up and I can delete it. That way I don't need it. If I click on a point, I can move it and manipulate it and start to bend a shape. By the way, let me just go over here and highlight this and delete by hitting the backspace button. If I highlight this and delete, if I click on it, I select it. But if I click on it again, you see that both of the points are selected. And then by hitting the backspace button, I can delete it. I think the other way is that if you select all these points, well, let me just leave these 2 points selected. I think also if you Control X, you see Control X on the shortcut keys will delete also, and I'm left with a single point. But when I have it now highlighted, it's blue, and if I just hit Control X, and that's on a PC, it would be Command X on a Mac, that gets rid of the point. Back to my shape up here, if I select it, I can now grab individual points and move them to where I want, and use these points to control the curve. And another way of controlling these, see, each side moves and is manipulated individually at this point. If you go to the edit shape, you have a smooth point and a symmetric point. If you have smooth point, that means that your point will move on either side. Your line will move and adjust its shape on either side of the point that you're manipulating. If you choose symmetric point, it's the same thing. But if you notice the difference, smooth point, I move the axis of the angle, but I only can grow and shrink one side at a time. If I use symmetric point, then when I move one side, the other side moves in correspondence with the opposite side. So I'm manipulating both sides of the line on the particular point. Again, a lot of this is, if you don't know vectors and use vectors, it may be hard to get your head around, but all you have to do is practice and play and experiment. If I select a number of these points, then I can move all of them together and make a large adjustment. Another way of doing that is by coming outside with your pointer, outside of the line, and drawing a box. Now these points that were inside the box are the ones that are selected. So now you're moving these points in a group. So you can select points individually. You can shift and select. You hold the shift button down and select points and have them, as you let go, then now you can move the group, or deselect by clicking off of them, and you can completely select all the ones you want to select by having them included in a box selection. So when you're editing the shapes with the Edit Shapes tool, that's where the bulk of your work is going to be when you're making your shape that you want to make. Now here's a situation where this comes to a point. It's a corner point. If I go back to this section and I show you, it's a symmetric point. If I want to change this symmetric point to be a corner point, I have it selected and then I hit corner point. You see that selected highlighted point kind of shifted positions to a diamond shape rather than a square shape. it rotated slightly. I'll show you again. If you look here, that is the symmetric point. The circle is a smooth point. It adjusts each side of the point individually, but keeps it a smooth curve. If you click on a corner point, now you can make a sharp point so that you can have a sharp corner. And if you see the entire thing, if I select the entire thing, I can move it around. But if I deselect from it, you can see. Oh, by the way, this looks like it's raster, but it is vector. It looks all rough and grainy, but it is actually a vector. It's just showing up like a raster or a bitmap when you zoom in on it. But this is actually a vector line. If I move in closer to this line and I want to alter the corner, see how the corner is now more sharp? That's a bevel joint. That's a curved joint. And that's the miter joint. See how sharp an edge that is? Oh, let me grab this. You have to have it selected. Ah. There we go. You have to have it selected. Oy. Sometimes it can be a little crazy. And then now that's a miter. Now it's rounded. And now it's beveled. I'm going to leave it on the miter joint. So that's a sharp corner. Let's look at the very end of this. This is an end. I want it to be rounded. There it is, rounded. There it is. That's a butt cap. These things are esoteric. What you need to do is get familiarized with the basic shapes first, the shape tools to make the shapes that you want, and just move things around to see what works and what doesn't and how things work. I don't know that I'm being much help at all. If there's a specific question maybe I can help with that. But I wanted to try to make this video to make things easier to see what things look like when they're being moved. I don't know if I've accomplished that. Let me just show you. I was moving this individually. If I wanted to change the shape of this bend here to be symmetrical, I have this selected, this point, and go up and hit symmetric point. Now both sides will move in conjunction with each other. If this is happening and you don't want it to be happening, you can try one of the other settings, a smooth point, which will move the one side independent of the other, but still keep the curve smooth. Or if you want a sharp edge, change it to a corner point to sharpen the edge. I think I'm going to end this video right now, and hopefully it hasn't been way too confusing. There's another thing before I leave. If you want to save this line work as an SVG, a scalable vector graphic file, you don't go up here and hit export or save as, because what it's going to do is it's going to export. Well, you don't want to see all that. When you try to export, you cannot export in SVG here. What you have to do is go to Layer, Import, Export, Save Vector Layer as SVG. And I'm saving it right here as an SVG. I'm going to just call it SVG1, and I'm going to save it, and here it is. And if I open another program that uses SVGs, Zara Designer Pro is a program that uses SVGs. If I want to import the SVG that I just made, exported from Krita, there it is. If I open it, there's my SVG. The same shape that I have in Krita. And if you look at it in this program, it is a true vector line. you can see that it is smooth and it mathematically enlarges and gets smaller. It's not a raster line, even though over in Krita, when you enlarge the canvas, it looks like a raster line. It's not. It is a vector line, as you can see from this program, and it can be manipulated as a vector shape in another vector program, which you could use Inkscape or Zara or whatever other vector program that is available to you. I think that I have completely confused anybody who's watching this. So ask questions if this is a problem. If this does not help, maybe asking individual questions when you have trouble will be the best thing to do. I haven't even covered having a solid shape, having a fill, but that is something that can be done also. I think before I end this, I will show that it says not filled. I'm going to fill it with the background color. Well, foreground color. It needs to be selected first. If you want to change that to the background color, oh, where is that? That's showing the foreground color is the selection of the line. The background color is the fill. That's when you're using particular shapes. If I want a square that is a black line, there it is. To go into that rectangle, it's not a square, and you can convert this to a path so that you have all sides and then you can start manipulating the shape of it. If I select all the points, I can change the corner, rounded, mitered. Okay, I think I'm getting it very confusing, so I'm going to end this. If there's any help that is needed, perhaps you can ask. If there's anyone who can explain this better than I have, go right ahead. Otherwise, I'll see what I can do to help when any situation comes up. Thanks for listening.